You're live now.
Okay. Well, hello everybody. Thanks for whoever's joining and whoever's probably trying to figure out how to join and coming in right now. Um, Maybe we'll just give it a couple of minutes or just a minute or so, just so people can get the link. I know a few people have just started to sort of search for it now, so I'll give it a minute or so. But yes, as the title suggests, this is the How to Write a Song workshop with South Asian Heritage Month. So we're going to be going from the beginning to the end, hopefully within 20 minutes, I'd say 15 minutes, and have enough time for Q&A at the end. So I'll just give it a minute and then we'll start. Great. So it's 2 minutes past now, so I think we'll get started and people can sort of join as they come in. But yes, hello everyone again, and thanks a lot for joining. My name is Navina. I'm a producer, singer, songwriter, and multi instrumentalist, and I'm really excited to be involved with South Asian Heritage Month this year. My genre is sort of indie pop, indie folk, acoustic music. So it's been really great to sort of bring that South Asian representation within that and being passionate about that over the last few years. At the same time, all the other sort of musical and arts events that have gone on and are going to be going on as part of the month. So yeah, it's really great to sort of do a deep dive as well on a topic that's really close to my heart, which is songwriting. But before we get into it and before I take you through things, I just thought I'd let you know that if you do want to ask a question, just put it in the chat or you can, email South Asian Heritage Month. But I think the easiest way is for you to sort of just put it in the chat. So firstly, like I mentioned about me, I've been doing music now for maybe 5 to 10 years. I started with classical flute. I did sort of classical training, all the grades and stuff on classical flute. Then I picked up the piano, did some training on that, classical training on that. But I only started to sort of fall in love with songwriting on the guitar. And that's where it really sort of sparked a way to sort of express myself, but also just to really address a lot of topics and a lot of issues that was going on within me and within the world, but through music. So since then, I've gone on to release my own music. I produce all my music myself. I play all the instruments apart from the drums, and I also produce for other people and write for other people and co-write for other people. So I'm very much, into sort of DIY music, but I also songwrite and produce for other people. And I've been doing a lot of that over the last year, which has been great. I'm based in East London, an area which I really love. And I'm also a resident artist at the Roundhouse in London. So when we could do live stuff, it was really great to sort of be involved with all the live stuff they do. As I'm sure some of you will know, it's a really great venue. And they're really good as well with getting behind people. So that's a bit about myself. I guess what we're going to just address today is just if you're a beginner to songwriting, how to really think about it. What are the moving parts? How to really sort of get involved, and for some people it's a bit daunting when writing a song, and how to really approach it. So we'll hopefully go in steps. And yeah, if you have any questions on the way, just put it in the chat. I'm going to look at sort of the how you start from the beginning, from a song concept, looking at the lyrics, how that fits in with the music, how songwriting has changed as well. As a song today is very different to a song that was maybe 5, 10 years ago. and then just sort of other considerations and practical tips to sort of get you started. So first of all, I guess every song starts off with a concept. So the concept of concept is what I like to sort of say. It's like I think any good song has a strong concept running through it, and that concept can be something as concrete as based on a specific thing, or a specific experience, or it can just be based on a very vague concept, like the concept of life or love or parenthood or things like that. But there's so much complexity within humans and the way we think. And I think to be a songwriter, you do have to be quite a bit of a deep thinker to really step back and um, look at the philosophy of things and how things come about, what things mean to you. So I think, when you start sort of songwriting, writing a song, being clear about sort of what's the concept you want to sort of bring across with this song. Do you really like, I don't know, plants, and you want to really write about plants, and that's the concept that runs through the song? Or is it about something about saving someone's life, and you've got that concept running through the song? It doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to be absolute, and we'll sort of look at a couple of examples later on. But it could be, how it could be a mixture of an object and a feeling and emotion. So, for instance, how when you're sort of in love with somebody, how that really feels like a wave of water, and it just engulfs you, and you can't really get out of it. And it can be a mix of those things. So, I think knowing that and starting with the concept's really good, because you can build out from that. And it gives you sort of the imagery of water, or the imagery that you can use in the way that you write lyrics, and how the music also reflects that. And that, I think, really is a strong song, because although you might not, as a listener, always pick up on the little things that the songwriter does and how he or she has run the concept through the song, it really does make a difference, and it makes the listening experience and also the memorability of the song a lot more clear and a lot more easy to sort of remember. So I think, like, determining the concept, and that can be something as random as something that inspires you, or you can be more intentional about it. So there's always something to write about, I think, and there's so much stuff going on. Just sort of being inspired by what's around you and getting a concept clearly in your head is a good starting point. So moving on, I think, as I mentioned, moving on from that, I think lyrics sort of mirror the concept, right? I think, all songs, unless you're a classical musician or do instrumental stuff, have lyrics. Lyrics are extremely important. And what is more important, I think, in terms of making the listener's experience nice, is structure. I think humans are quite simple when it comes to it. And I think having a clear structure that people can recognize makes a song clear, makes the concept clear as well. So we'll get into it a bit later on the structure of the lyrics, but structure is very, very important. Rhyming, people sort of ask me, does everything have to rhyme? Does it have to be like a limerick, or, a very clear sort of poetic um, structure? Not necessarily, really. I think what's more important is sort of being clever, and the flow of the song is better than making sure everything rhymes, every second and third, or every second and fourth line rhymes with each other. I think the flow is very important. So I would prioritize that over rhyming. Rhyming is a great tool to make something flow easier, because just your ear always hears that. It's like a match that your ear will hear of something rhyming. It's like, oh, that's a match, and that's a structure, and that just sort of sounds nicer to the human ear. But there are other ways that you can make a song flow. So, for instance, syllables, not having something that has four syllables for each word, making sure that, like you do, if any of you have done sort of poetry within school, or anything higher than that, like making sure the rhythm of something is the syllables, basically, and making sure that flows, and making sure the pronunciation and the emphasis and the accents of what you speak when you're singing that fall nicely. So I think, you can hear it for yourself. Like in the English language, we always put certain accents on certain words, and making sure the rhythm of that also matches, whether it be the music at a later stage or what you're trying to say. So there are many ways to sort of do it. And I think one of the ways, just as an anecdote, I got into even songwriting or just doing music or production myself, is I was very good at poetry in school. And I was a very shy child, and my dad was like, "Oh, why don't you try take the poems into make the poems into lyrics?" I was like, What do you mean?" And he was like, I think, well, poems and lyrics are basically poems, aren't they? And he was so right. So, always listen to your dad. But yeah, it was totally right, because, lyrics are poems, and a lot of poems have been made into songs. And it should be the same sort of poetic flow and poetic creativity that you bring to lyrics as you bring to a poem. And it only enhances the songs, because by the time you put music to it, by the time you put the other stuff to it, it's all only enhancing what are already a very good set of lyrics and a very clear song with a clear structure. I would say practically, you have your concept, you're sort of writing the lyrics around that. And then once you've sort of got most of the rough lyrics, I think everyone should have a sort of stage where they streamline things down, where you sort of are, because the way we speak and the way we write things down often have too many words in them anyway. So you should have a stage where you're going through and you're taking like small words out that don't need to be there. You're taking just things out that really interrupt the flow, or just making things as smooth as possible. And I think that's always something that's good to do towards the end of the process. Okay, so that's lyrics, a little bit on lyrics, but we'll come back to that. So just some examples, I guess. I don't know if any of you will sort of recognize these two songs, but I just took like sort of a pop song that most people would have really listened to, and it's definitely been in the charts and everything. Bonus points if you recognize it, put it in the chat or whatever. But you can see, although when you were listening to this song, you probably didn't even recognize it, but you can see what the writer's done through the lyrics. So yeah, I won't give away the title, but the title really does reflect on how he's really put the concept of water, the sea, drowning, and he's linked that imagery, and he's run that imagery throughout the song so it's cohesive, and he's linked that to his overarching concept of being in love and self-sacrifice and jumping into cold water. And it's not always so obvious, right? He sort of says cold water, sinking, but then things like lifeline, taking a deep breath, and he's really gone through just the emotions and the feeling you have if you were drowning. Hopefully no one's had that experience, but that type of imagery that you have, and he's run that through the song. So I think always a good point to start off is, when you do have the concept, just a normal brainstorm chart, normal sort of cloud chart that you do. Just go off and like look at the imagery. What are the images that brings into my head? What are the emotions that brings into my head? What are the feelings? What are the actions? Breathing, drowning, sinking. And you should have some nice words to sort of build around when you're sort of building the song. Another example, I mean, elements have always been very, very good topics, rain, fire, water, sea, all of that stuff. Elements and nature's been a huge inspiration in songwriting generally. And here you see another very well known pop song. The concept of depths and fire, and sort of like more of like a fire pit, just being really run through the song. And it really works. It makes the listener's ear get the concept and get what the singer is trying to say. But it also just makes a lot for clever writing. They haven't just gone for like heat, fire, hot. They've gone for like fever pitch, depths down there, and it just gives you a lot of imagery as a listener. And also as a songwriter, sort of help your listener through the journey within the song. So those are a couple of examples. Yeah, well-known songs, and some of you might recognize them. So I guess coming back to lyrics, or structure specifically when it comes to lyrics, it really does depend on the genre, right? You have, think, acoustic music, singer-songwriter music, you have a bit more license to sort of do something a bit more drawn out. People are more invested in the imagery and the poetry. But then you've got pop songs. It's a very, very clear structure nowadays of what the listener, what the ear really wants to hear. Similar things with like rock, metal. I mean, it's all very, very different depending on the genre. Generally, though, this is the structure that I think I would follow, and that works, especially nowadays. Now things have really evolved to something that's slicker. You have your intro, and that's normally now it's getting shorter and shorter, but 4 bars, 8 bars at most, but 4 bars, maybe even less. Some songs don't even have an intro, so they go straight into it. Your first verse, where you're kind of introducing the concepts and sort of introducing what it is this song is saying and what you're singing about. Your chorus should be very clear because you're going to be going back to the chorus, and it should really tie together the verses. The chorus is the core of that's holding together all the other verses. um, then your other verses, some people do verse 2 and verse 3 together, because verse 3, by the time you've got the second chorus, as you can see down there, the listeners already heard the chorus once, so they're a bit bored already. So verse 3 sometimes gives some space to really build up or change the music up a bit, so that when the chorus comes around, people are like, oh yeah, that's familiar, and it's not so boring. So sometimes you do verse 2 and verse 3 together, but maybe just verse 2. Then normally I'd say like the chorus twice to really sort of solidify things. And then the middle eight. So the middle eight is basically, some people call it the bridge. I always like to call it the middle eight. Middle eight is basically the 8 bars of a different sort of interlude, I would say, within the music, that really, once you've got to, I guess, the second chorus, people are a bit bored, right? So the middle eight really just sort of shakes things up to get the listener ear sort of fresh again, and maybe says a different message or sounds quite different to the rest of the song, but it's just a change up. So by the time that you come to the second or the last chorus, people are again like, oh yeah, that's familiar, and it's a bit more familiar to them. And then maybe an outro. Outros are becoming also less and less prevalent these days, but yes, outro as well at the end. So yeah, very sort of quick, rough structure on how the lyrics or the song normally flows. Like I say, dependent on the different genres as well. Right. So I guess coming back to lyrics, and I think, I'm spending more time on lyrics here because I think a song, when you're a songwriter, you're sending over maybe a vocal line of the melody and the lyrics, and that's the song really. I think the producer's job is adding in the music and the other instrumentation, which I don't think we'll really have time to sort of cover today. But the lyrics are extremely important because it is the song. So we're spending a lot of time on that. And lyrics also, I mentioned the structure and having a concept and keeping the concept throughout. But I think just some sort of practical tips on how you can sort of come at lyrics if that's a part of the song that is less natural to you. I think spontaneously when you're sort of walking around, I write a lot of stuff spontaneously, just sort of singing things through in my head, or if there's something that inspires me, or if I'm at a bus stop and I hear a conversation and suddenly I'm just like, oh, that's quite an interesting point. So, and then being quite spontaneous with it, and really making, I guess, a lyric out of anything can be something great. And it also can be a bit more natural, I think, when you're not really trying to write things down as lyrics, but just singing them out. It can make a bit more of a spontaneous verse or spontaneous chorus than really being mechanical about everything. So that's one methodology. Another methodology, very popular, sampling. So, you've heard, I guess, like the likes of Jay-Z sampling other people. Like sampling is basically just putting in another person's song within your own song, maybe keeping it exactly the same or changing parts of it. Obviously, like, you have to, if you sample things directly, copyright issues, and you have to disclose that. But taking inspiration from other songs is something that everybody does. If you think about how long music's been around, everyone's sort of every song is a derivative of some song out there. And you've seen a lot in the press about people sort of kicking off about copyright issues, but there is a lot of inspiration from stuff that has already been written. So sampling directly, or just being more sort of inspired about, take your three favorite artists, look at how they write their lyrics. Writers, even mainstream writers like John Mayer, really good imagery throughout his lyrics. So many others just are really good writers when it comes to that. So taking inspiration on how they do things. And then, like I say, like trying to be clever with it, maybe wordplay when you're brainstorming that initial idea. Looking at how you can sort of play on words, maybe use sayings or idioms that really relate to that, to make things that are familiar and that we use in everyday language, like an idiom, and then using that within a song. But yeah, keeping the concept throughout, I think, is always a good bet when you're sort of playing around with these different tools. So yeah, that's lyrics. And then music. Like I mentioned, we could spend like a whole session just on music alone. I think deciding the core instrument at the beginning is important. I think if you're someone who writes with playing an instrument, it's easier because you're on your guitar, your piano, and then you're normally writing on that one anyway. But I think it really depends on whether you can do that. And also, if you don't do that, just sort of thinking about what's the sort of vibe or the genre of this song, and which guitar or which instrument will really be most suited towards that. Because a song written on the piano and the same song written on the guitar can sound extremely different. So having some sort of idea of what's the core instrument here is important. And then obviously the chords and the actual music itself is important. Like, I think most songs, pop songs, are comprised of what, four chords these days. So it's not really about being extremely fancy with the chords, but I think it's the structure, the concept, and what you do with those four chords, which is more important, in my opinion. So once you've decided on that, I think having some idea with how the basic core instrument goes with the lyrics and how that complements the lyrics is extremely important. We say like the rise and fall of the song or the climax of the song. Generally, within art, that's a concept, right? Within films or music, you have the climax of the movie, and you have sort of the arch of characters. If any of you've done any film study work, similar things with songs. You want the listener to sort of have some sort of build up. The middle eight is normally the break to that, and then you normally have a build up afterwards, in the last chorus, and that's that rise and fall. And it just makes a song easier to listen to and nicer to listen to. So if you can write the music and when you're writing the music, keeping that in mind, I think is always important. Because as I say, and as I really do think, like, if you've got a good song, you don't need to wait till all the layers come in to make it, sound really good and make it a nice song to listen to and easy to listen to. I think if you've got a song that is good, and you've had that rise and fall in the basic top line, so the music top line and the vocal top line, then it's just the other layers will be an enhancement of that, and the other layers will help build on that. But if you've got a terrible song which isn't well structured, which is quite boring to listen to, which doesn't have that rise and fall, which hasn't really been thought about through, then you can try add layers. It might help it a bit, but it won't really become a great song. um and then I put sort of, the time of the song, like, is that important? Because some people sort of do ask, songs are becoming shorter these days, and that is a fair point. I think nowadays songs are 3 minutes max. A good pop song, if you sort of look at it, most of them will be around 3 minutes. Especially with, I guess, social media and the way things have sort of rolled out and technology, the attention to, or the attention span of people has really shortened. So it's sort of 3 minutes now. But I always think I wouldn't sort of limit it to 3 minutes. I think if a song has got good structure, if it's been thought about well, and if it's been thought through, then there's no reason why it has to be really a tight 3 minutes sort of max. I think it depends on the genre for sure, but it also depends on how you've written the song. So, I think 5 minute, 6 minute songs. Okay, maybe that's a little bit long, but I wouldn't sort of be obsessed over the time, as some people are. I would sort of focus more on the structure of the song, really. Um, so yeah, that's a little bit about music. Could say a lot about that, but we'll leave it at that, and maybe anyone has questions. Um, and then I guess other considerations, really, just sort of practical tips. I've covered off a few early on, but maybe just a few more. I think technology, on the flip side of what I've said, technology is great nowadays because you can record right into anything. You can be, I think, the most spontaneous you have been able to, in terms of getting ideas down. So if you have a iPhone or whatever, and you have sort of a voice memos or ways to record into that, I think that's a really good tool, because you might have a melody in your head, that you probably won't remember in 5 minutes, and you can sort of just record it into your phone, come back to it later when you need to have more material, or if you want to dedicate a day to songwriting, come back to all the sort of voice memos that you've recorded and build on those. So recording things into voice memos is really good. Similar with writing lyrics on your notes, putting things into there, being spontaneous about that is great. And allowing room for spontaneity is also important, like I've mentioned. Music before lyrics or lyrics before music, I don't think it really matters, to be honest. I think some people their methodology or their processes, they write the music first and then they put the lyrics to it. So I think, I think other people it's the other way around. So finding what works for you is important. Finding what really, produces your best material is important. Sometimes it's a mix of both. Sometimes, for instance, for me, it is a mix of both and it's very different. I'll maybe have the lyrics that I've written 2 years ago, and suddenly I'll have the music for it, and I'll be going through sort of lyric ideas and put the music to the lyrics. What I did for some of my recent releases, to be honest. So sometimes it's finding what works best together, rather than being really intentional about just writing both at the same time or having a whole song. Um, I think other practical tips that have also helped me is looking at, like I've mentioned, what other people have done. So following chord progressions or the way people have structured songs that you really admire. I did that for my debut release, 27 Hearts. So, I mean, people won't really know that you've done this, but I think like looking at the chord progressions and the sort of sevenths that one of my favorite bands called Hon had put in on one of their songs and sort of building my song around that similar chord progression was something that helped me. I mean, the song sounds completely different to Hon or a Hon song, but it's something that can really help you build structure when you're finding it difficult to do that. And it just also brings a bit of a dimension to your music that you might not do when you're sitting down and just thinking for yourself. So I think that's really important. Important, and then yeah, I think then just other considerations is like just sort of have fun with it and remember that songwriting is really powerful. It's really fun, and it should be fun at least. And it's a really great way to just express yourself. So I think not having to sort of get everything perfect. I think these are good tips to sort of get you started. But at the end of the day, it's an art, and not a science. And everybody's different. Some people like songwriting alone most of the time. Some people only songwrite in sessions. Some people songwrite just the music. Some people songwrite lyrics. So it's really a variety of what would work for you. There is no right or wrong answer. Like I should just say, these are sort of the ways I've come about things and what I've picked up and the way things have worked when I'm working on other people's songs and what people have really loved about my songwriting tips. But then at the same time, someone might do something very different. So, yeah, remember it's an art, not a science, and remember to have fun with it. Yeah, so I think that's a very sort of question, like a very sort of whistle stop tour of what I think songwriting should be. If there are any questions, I said we'll sort of keep it to 25 minutes. I think we're a bit over that. So if there are any questions, do just pop them in. And yeah, just reach out on socials, and that's my email as well. If anyone wants to sort of learn more about it or has any further questions. Right. So I've got a few questions here. Okay, quite a couple of good questions here. So the first one comes from someone that wants to know, how do you get over writer's block? Okay, yeah, I think that's a really good question actually, because I think everyone generally within creative industries will come to a point where they just can't do anything more. I think number one, taking a break is important, because just trying to be productive or working or trying to be creative when nothing's coming is important. I think refreshing your brain mentally is really important. So taking, at least a day or two break, even more if you can, is important. But then I think also looking maybe externally. So, like I mentioned, looking at, if it's writer's block over lyrics, then it's looking at other lyrics and how people have looked at other concepts, bringing it back to that concept and thinking about, okay, if I can't find things to write about, what actually does inspire me, or what do I want to say within this material? If you've got writer's block within stuff that you're already working on, and after you've taken a break. I think looking at the sort of musical elements of maybe some other people who have um, also been writing about similar things is important. So looking at like the chords that they've used or looking at the structure that they've used is important. And then also maybe it is a question of collaborating with somebody else. Maybe a fresh pair of eyes is important in looking at how you've been looking at something differently to how you've been looking at it. So maybe it is about collaborating with other people. Um, I think if you are a spontaneous writer, your ability to, or the danger of getting writer's block is a little less because you're just always like spontaneously like looking at things or putting things out. But sometimes when you're working on a specific song, yeah, I think it's about taking a break, coming back to it with fresh eyes, and if it's still like not really getting anywhere, maybe working on something else or inviting somebody else to also take a look and being like, oh, what do you think about this? So yes, that's important. Um, okay, and then another question here. So what? So you mentioned that music and lyrics, or the order of music and lyrics is doesn't really matter. Do you think that one is more powerful than the other? Yeah, that's also a really good question. I think I think when I say it doesn't matter, I think it doesn't matter in terms of you finding your right style and what works for you. Maybe for you, it works the fact that you write the lyrics first and then you write the music. And then if that works for you, stick with that. I do think generally, though, having the lyrics, like I mentioned, tied down first or tied down well is the most powerful because you can always build music around good lyrics or a good song and a good structure. Whereas if you've got really poor lyrics and really like a song that doesn't flow, then like I say, the music can maybe help build it out, but then it's not really going to enhance the song as much as possible because you're already working with a poorly made song. So I think my emphasis in terms of songwriting, and this is as a songwriter, maybe not as a producer, but as a songwriter, I think the lyrics is important, and getting that ironed out is important first, and then after that it's sort of the music that can be sort of added to that. I do think the preference is that doing this both at the same time is the most natural. If you're blessed to be able to play musical instruments, being able to sort of do that at the same time is the most natural because you're writing the lyrics and playing the music and it's all flowing at the same time. But if not, I think it's equally good if you can just sort of make the song as good as possible and then find somebody else maybe to enhance it with the music and the sort of instrumentation side of things. Right. Well, I don't have any more questions unless anybody else wants to ping over any in the next 5 seconds. But yes, thank you all for joining. It's been really great to chat to you. Yeah, like I say, if you have any questions, do feel free to reach out at Navina Music on socials. But yeah, I hope this sort of inspires you to write a lot of songs. And yeah, I look forward to hearing all of them that come out of them. But yeah, have a good rest of your weekends and we will speak soon, I'm sure.